Howdy folks, Doc here with Last Best Tool. Let's take a closer look at these two flush cutting pliers. This is the Snap-on 786CF. It sells for about $83.75. And this is the Icon PCF-600. Sells at your local Harbor Freight for about a penny under $30. They are extremely similar all the way around. Snap-on's got the green handle here. The Icon only comes in red. I'm wondering maybe soon Icon, maybe they'll offer, different colored grip or dipped handles such as orange and green for those of us that like that. The overall design is almost identical. Now, a flush cutting plier basically is designed, as it says on both of them, for plastic and soft wire only. It is an extremely fine instrument. In fact, both come with these covers that are designed to protect the blade, just like that. You can tell the Snap-on one from the Icon one because the Icon one is shaped like the letter H for Harbor Freight, I guess. But anyway, there are other flush cutting pliers. The design basically is for most of us to simply trim off things like zip ties, so there is no way you can cut yourself or it snags on anything. That's the biggest use, but other people with more refined applications need them for the wire, etc. There are simpler options. There's small ones. These are like $10. These Kleins here, and these are made in the United States, I believe. This one, yeah, made in the USA. Milwaukee makes a good one here. In fact, Milwaukee and Klein, I'm starting to see a lot of similar tools here, just kind of like Snap-on and Harbor Freight. In fact, here's another example that I'm going to explore, and that has to do with this crimper. This one is the crimper stripper from Klein. This is just the crimper from Milwaukee. I do like that they have these cutting knives right up at the tip, but Klein also makes one without the stripper, so it would look very much like this. Very similar. So I'm seeing Milwaukee, this is one of their newer tools, coming out with things that are direct competitors to specific Klein designs. You can even get flush cutters here. I think these were like $2 or less. I bought a handful of them for $3.99 or something. Maybe they were 50 cents. I'd have to watch my own video, but these are much beefier, better. They're heavier, they're larger. They will last longer, although as I was studying this, I have noticed some wear on the Snap-on from use. So anyway, let's go into a deeper dive. Here are some subtle differences. Even though they look quite similar, the finish work is a little different. Here on the Snap-on, you can see the handles. I'll keep the color in so you can see. On the forging, this is much cruder than the Icon here. However, if you move into the rotating area, not a surface that touches anything, but the rotating area up here, the Snap-on is polished. You can see that right up here, whereas the Icon is not. Now, sometimes I wonder, is that because nobody looks up in there? They might compare this, or maybe it really doesn't matter because it doesn't touch anything, although it seems like it might hold grit or dirt a little bit easier than a smooth surface. The handles feel very similar. The plastisol that Snap-on uses is common. There's nothing proprietary really that I know of about it. It's designed, it's like a polyvinyl chloride that you can add different dyes to, different polymers in order to get whatever consistency you want. It's kind of uniform across a lot of industries. The pivots are a little different. You can see here on this side, line them up this way. There is this hole. Somebody who knows a lot more about rivets might know more about the design. This is a newer one, so it leaks whatever lubricant they've got in there for quite a while. And there's the Snap-on on this side. If you look at the profile of the kind of the business end here, the Snap-on has a very slight overlap. Now, I don't know if that's by design or not. You can kind of see it there. The Harbor Freight, or the icon, is silky smooth there. You also have tool marks in kind of one direction, whereas the Snap-on, it looks like it was more of a wheel. So, you know, kind of what a round saw looks like when you're cutting lumber. As far as the little kind of the irritation space, I don't know what to call it, right down here, there is going to be a little gap on both of them. It's bigger on the Harbor Freight, and I'll show you under the microscope in a sec. And that means that if you cut something, you can do this. This is the icon. If I drop this all the way down as close as I can to the pivot and squeeze, it's an incomplete cut. I can do the same with the Snap-on here. And you did hear that pop, we'll get into that. But as you can see, the Snap-on, it also had an incomplete cut, but much closer to being done. So if I grab the end and pull, it's going to break at the Snap-on cut. You can see the Harbor Freight, or the Icon one, left a lot more. None of that matters once you move above that point. They both cut extremely well. We'll get into that. But the Snap-on does have a pop, and it doesn't feel quite as smooth. Now that smoothness may be desirable or not. We'll get into it. Let's take a look at that little space real quick and crank up a couple lights here. This one's going to give me, turn that thing on here, some backlighting, and then this will give me some forelighting. Now, this is all amplified here when you look at it, so you know, take it with a grain of salt whether or not it's a really big deal. But it is something I noticed. So let me focus this thing in. There is that space right there. As you can see, that's how big it is on the Snap-on. That little thing, where's the focus? There it is. This is the icon right here. It's actually bigger. Get in here. There we go. You can see when I turn it to allow for maximum light through, it's a little bit bigger. But that's, since it's on the same, this one, I was trying to think, is that any way a feature? Is there any way that having a flush cutter not completely make the cut useful? I don't know. But if you do, let me know. If you look at the, actually one other thing here, the closing of these, bring it up a little bit so you can see, focus this in, oops, right there, and getting some cool physics light distortions along these edges. Reminds me of college, huh? Way back. But anyway, there's the tip. You can see that. The profile. Also, here is the line. As I close this, the tip closes first on the Harbor Freight. Let's see if I can get that to show through here. Might just have to settle for a view. Maybe down here. Maybe this would be easier. So when this closes, sometimes I can see a little bit of light through there until I squeeze a little bit harder. The Snap-on the other hand, does have a noticeable gap. You can see it right there. These are closed up at the tip. That's what the Snap-on tip, very similar. But there is a noticeable gap. You can see it there. You know, let me give this a little bit more height. Just have to grab another Est-wing hammer to get it up here and line it up. There we go. But anyway, now you might see there is a little bit of light right there. You see that? So you have to push it closed. But once you do, if I look really close, I can actually see some limited spaces, and also, I mean, where it's not perfect, and that's where I'm seeing some wear too on mine, which I don't know. You see that right there? Small things, lifetime warranty. But anyway, when it comes to cutting, let's take a look. Both of them, I'm going to do a flush cut here with the Snap-on. Now you saw that piece fly away. Keep that in mind. So here is the snap-on flush cut. Turn it towards the light, that might help. Right there. Try to get it by the side. Just a hair, and that's under magnification. You can see right there, right at this point, there's a tiny bit that sticks up. Right there. And then let's go to the Harbor Freight. Our icon part here, we'll cut that. I'm kind of adding a little back tension as I do this. Line it up straight. Do you see that? It just doesn't shoot it across the room. To me, that's an advantage. But and there it is. I hate to say it. That looks better. See that? You know what? Let me go down. I'll make it a little bit bigger here. Which way? Right there. See that right there? Let's try it again. Here's the snap-on. Hold it, line it up, push, click, shot it. That had to go 30 yards. So there it is. And there's the lip. Look at that. See how much is up there? Let me try it again. So I'm just sticking that through a little bit, putting tension on it. Right there. Watch your eyes. There it is. Look at that. Get it down. There we go. See how far that sticks out? This is the part. Here, I'll expand it. Right there. That's the part that comes out. So let's try Harbor Freight again. I'm holding this tight. Line that up. Snip. It's nice and soft. Complete, though. Let's take a look. Look at that. There's less. So the Harbor Freight is actually cutting more flush. Let me compare that while I've got them out here. I'll do the Milwaukee because that's the newer of the ones. We'll go ahead and try the $10. Whoa! That went 40 yards. And there it is. That's pretty much similar to the snap-on right there. The snapping of the, let me cut this here. That is something to notice. So here is just a piece of the zip tie. I'll just cut it in the center here. You can see, shoots it out with precision. Here's that Milwaukee while it's here. Wow, that went a long way. And then here's the Harbor Freight. It's very soft. Kind of builds it up and sticks. I don't see any retainer here, but it does seem to hold that, which is kind of interesting. So I'd have to call a win there. Now there is another test I want to run here, and that is a hardness test. Now one of the things with hardness, especially on pliers, and the more refined the plier, maybe the bigger effect, but what we've got is a very, I guess, specific edge. It's not just a general plier edge. This is very specific for its job. And these have differential, at least on the snap-on, has differential hardening. So the handles are not the same hardness as the blade, as the cutting knives. That's deliberate. I don't know, Icon didn't say, but I'm assuming that they may have done either an induction hardening of the knives, cutting knives, or possibly a laser hardening, or laser heating and hardening. But let's go ahead and try it. So I've got 3 of my hardness testers here. The yellow one is a 45, the blue one is a 60, and the green is in the middle. So I'm going to start, actually I'm going to start with the hardest here to get a feel for what it's like scratching this. So here's the Icon, and the 60 definitely scratched it. Let's try it on the snap-on here. Definitely scratched it, actually a little bit easier. So let's go down to the 50. So I'll move down just a hair here. Okay, so this scratched at 55. Or no, it's 60, excuse me. what do I got going? 45, 50. Let me try 55. Sorry. So it scratched at 60. Did not scratch at 50. Here is 55. So is that a scratch? Yeah. I'm going to call that a scratch. So I'm going to call this, it's between 50 and 55 here. The Harbor Freight one scratched at 60. This one again is the 55. Let's scratch that. Yeah, barely. It still feels a little harder, but we're going to call it the same. 55, it scratches. 50, it doesn't. So somewhere in there. So now let's move up to the knives. And instead of trying to scratch right on the edge, I'm going to go along the edge and see. And I've got the 55 here in my hand on the Harbor Freight. I'm not getting any scratch there. Let's go up to the 60 on the... Is that scratching? Nope. I am not getting a scratch there. So let's go to, this is the highest I've got. This is a 65. Let's try that. Is that scratching? Yeah, barely. Let's try the snap-on. So I'm going to work my way up. I will start here. There's the 60. Actually, I start with a 55 because that was what we were scratching the handle with. Nothing. I don't think. Nope. Nothing there. Let's go to the 60. Nothing. 65. Nothing. And I've run out of these things. So the snap-on is over 65. The Harbor Freight here just barely at 65. Let me try the upper one here. I'm going to have to call this a tie. Maybe. There might be, I don't know if I'm not really, it doesn't feel like I'm scratching metal. So I think they are both over 65. I've run out of testers. I guess I'm going to have to buy a bigger set, huh? Anyway, so I guess they score the same there. Score the same on the handles, but you can really see there's a huge difference. And I'll retest that when I actually do go back to the Harbor Freight and Snap-on needle nose and actually test them up at the business end and see if there's a difference. But overall, they are extremely hard up there. So anyway, kind of cut to the chase. These are 30 bucks. These are $84. These cut smoother, and they seem to cut, according to the Microscope, more precisely. The finish work is better, except for that inside part there. There's no overlap, although some flush cutters do have overlap. The handles are very similar. The design is extremely similar. Tips very similar. They expand the same. They feel about the same. Neither one's spring-loaded. Anyway, there it is. Long video, but it's an in-depth look at the two flush cutters of Snap-on and Icon. I might revisit this, but if you've got any questions, post them in the comments, and I may take that into consideration when I revisit the other Icon and Snap-on stuff. And with that, Doc out.